But for me, I like to think of it as a space of protection, a space of self-preservation. It's needing to step away from the world because having gone through something that is so incredibly painful, there might be triggers that show up in the outside world that bring even more pain, that really pushes you over the edge, that really might bring you to a point where you don't even know if you'll be able to survive. Hello, beloved. Welcome to another episode of the Preparing for Pregnancy After Loss podcast. This is your host, Natalie Facey. And if you're new to the podcast, this is where I share tips and resources and practices around healing after a pregnancy loss, an infertility diagnosis, any challenges regarding the pregnancy journey, as well as moving through your personal rebirth, moving through connecting to your sense of wholeness, connecting to the version of you that wants to be birthed as a result of this really difficult experience that you're going through. Thank you for joining. It is always an absolute treat. Always, always such a gift to be here with you in this way. All right, the topic we'll be exploring this week is suffering in silence. I would say what feels like it's a juxtaposition in relation to that topic is I'm recording this episode outside. I typically am recording in a room, indoors, even if I'm in a space that's natural. But this time I'm outside. And I like that suffering in silence, it usually is this internal experience. I envision it as being in a closed room with the shades down, not much lighting in the room, and really sort of closed off from the world. And I like that this message is coming to you from a space that's open. It's like out in the open. And perhaps the invitation is, can there be movement towards being out in the open? And not in a way where it feels so vulnerable that it is too scary to even consider, but in a way that there is just this gentle movement towards what nourishes you. So, as we're approaching the evening, you will hear all kinds of creatures become alive. You might hear the wind, you might hear birds, and it's all a part of the richness of life. It's all a part of the environment. All right, so shall we get into this episode? Yeah, let's do that. All right, so I led a workshop a couple of years ago, and it spoke to the journey that we go through as we're moving through the healing process. So something difficult, traumatic, painful happens to you, such as a loss, right? The loss of a child, the loss of a pregnancy, the loss of the desire to become pregnant in the way that you imagine that it would happen, right? Some painful loss. And usually the first thing that happens after that, after the shock of like, oh my gosh, what's happening? We move into what I have called, like the cave. And the cave for me is a really sacred space. It is a space of being sheltered, and it can be considered as a space of hiding. But for me, I like to think of it as a space of protection, a space of self-preservation. It's needing to step away from the world because having gone through something that is so incredibly painful, there might be triggers that show up in the outside world that bring even more pain, that really pushes you over the edge, that really might bring you to a point where you don't even know if you'll be able to survive. What people might call shutdown, it really is the body's wisdom recognizing that you're at maximum capacity. You're at a point where you cannot take in any more stimuli, and you cannot take the risk of exposing yourself to some insensitive comment, exposing yourself to something that brings even more harm on top of what you're already experiencing, more pain on top of what you're already experiencing. And so, yeah, I think of the next stage after the shock of going through something difficult is a stage of self-preservation, this stage of self-protection. And the cave might look like that room I just described, right? It's being in this place that feels protective, away from other people, away from the bright lights, away from the noise, and really being able to sit, to lie, really being able to be with yourself and perhaps contemplate this question: what the fuck just happened? Yeah. What just happened? Like what just happened? And it's such an important space to be in, because there is deep processing that happens in this space that's away from the rest of the world, right? And a part of the other reason why we enter into this space is because we might perceive, doesn't mean that this is always true, but we might perceive that our family members and friends and even our partner might not fully understand what we just went through, right? And sometimes that is where the insensitive comments start, right? They have a desire to be helpful, they have a desire to be encouraging, and they say things that just end up not being helpful. They say things that sometimes ends up being really hurtful, really painful. And so, entering into this cave is protecting yourself from that, right? And so what typically happens is we're in this cave, and I think of mine as being nicely decorated, still with the lights turned down low. We're in this cave, and there might be a point when we realize that we're actually having the experience of suffering in silence. We're having the experience of feeling as though we're the only ones going through it. No one else understands. No one else understands to the degree that we understand. No one else will get it. And no one has gone through the intensity of what we just went through. Right, so those are some of the thoughts that might come up, or some variation of those thoughts. And so really, suffering in silence is the isolation that either we enact, or the sense of isolation that we're feeling within our system, right? So we can physically isolate, be in our rooms, be in our corners, be in our own spaces, because someone might say some bullshit that just brings more hurt on top of the hurt that is already there, right? Or the isolation comes from, they don't understand, they don't get it. They think they know what I just went through, but they don't really know. They can't feel all of these things that I feel inside, right? And so I'm saying all of that to say it starts from a place of self-preservation, but then there can be this really fine line between self-preservation, right? Doing that because you needed that at that stage of the healing journey, and self-isolation that then leads to decline, right? Self-preservation versus self-isolation that then leads to decline. And decline can look like different things. It can be decline in your relationships, might be your romantic relationship, it might be relationships with friends, family members. It can be a decline in the relationship with yourself, right? The perception of who you are changes in a way that you've lost some sense of who you are. It can be a decline in your mental, emotional, or even physical health. It can be a decline in your ability to believe in life, ability to continue to be hopeful, ability to expect good things to happen. And your ability to vision, your ability to dream. And so, the decline can look like different things. And again, just continuing this experience of suffering in silence. And I also want to name that there might be other areas in life where there is still motion forward, especially those areas in which there is external validation, right? So you might still have motion forward in your career. You might still have motion forward in the things that you buy for yourself that people are going to see and that people will attach some social status to. There might be motion forward in passion projects that you have, right? In the ways that you are seen and validated and celebrated in the world, there might be motion forward there. And the reason why I'm naming that it's typically in those areas specifically is when we experience this deep, deep wound around pregnancy or fertility that we're taught is the thing that we're meant to do. It's a thing that our bodies are known to do, right? So when we experience that deep wound that challenges our sense of self, it means that we're likely going to look to compensate in other areas. We're going to say, okay, that's not working, and the people around me think that I am broken or deficient in these areas. Let me show them that I'm not by excelling in these other areas, right? It's typically something around that line of thought that occurs. And so it might resonate, it might be surprising. Feel into it and see if it's something that resonates, or it might not, right? It might not be your truth. So again, there is a decline and sort of like a shutdown that's happening in the other areas of your life, right? There might be greater and greater decline in relationships, greater and greater decline in the relationship with yourself, right? Greater and greater decline in health, mental, physical, emotional, decline in just the ability to be hopeful about life, to be excited, to look forward to things in life, to believe in life, to trust in life, to trust that there's a force that holds you, that supports you, that wants the best for you. Right. There are these areas of your life that might really appear to be thriving, right? Again, there's motion forward. You're doing well in these areas of life. And so because the external appears to be thriving or is actually thriving, there's the perception that people have that you're fine, that you're okay, that you're good. And so even with that, it's like there are different realities that you're living from the one that people perceive that you're living, right? So there's more of the suffering in silence that happens. So today's episode is to just explore that. Today's episode is to bring some language to that, bring some conscious awareness to that, because you're not meant to be suffering in silence. You're not, right? While at some point in your journey, the silence, the isolation was necessary for self-preservation, it was necessary for your healing. And even as I'm saying that, I'm remembering that in the midst of my first loss, it probably took a good weeks for me to let my family know. And I mean close family members, like very close family members. It probably took a good 2 weeks. And the reason why it did is I was just going through my what the fuck just happened. And I was also going through, feelings around shame, right? Like this hasn't happened to anyone. Why is it happening to me? What did I do wrong? But I really just needed that time to be by myself, to be with myself, to be with my partner. And I'm grateful that he really held that, like he really protected that space. He really protected that space so that I wasn't bothered. There was no communication, that I could just be. Right? And so while it starts out as a result of that need for self-preservation, a result of that need to really care for yourself and tend to the emotions that are there, if it's going on for too long, if it's being extended for too long, then it can lead to the decline, right? And so, yeah, having added some voice to that, having added some language to that, the next thing that I want to say is that these painful experiences that we go through, they're not meant to leave us feeling broken. They're not meant to leave us feeling as though we can never trust in life again, or we can never dream again, we can never desire again. They're not. So the episode just before this one that I recorded was around spiritual bypass, and definitely check that out if you haven't yet. So this isn't going to be an example of the spiritual bypass. This isn't the section of our time together where I tell you that everything happens for a reason and that, you should work on finding that reason. We're not going to do that. But what I will say, and this is something that I touched on in that episode as well, is if we can't find the reason, if we don't know why something happened, then there's also the opportunity to create meaning or to find meaning. And that really means being in control of the story that we tell ourselves. It means assigning new meaning to the experience. And so fresh out of the experience and me being in a state of shock, the meaning that I was assigning was I did something wrong. It had to be me because I was the one holding this baby inside of me. So if this baby isn't here, it's my fault, right? That's I would say like that's the reason. I didn't have a reason, but that's the story. I think that's a better term for it. That's a story I was telling myself. And, getting support, moving through my healing, whether it was through my coach, my somatic therapist, the support group I was attending. I think those were it. My own processes of journaling and being in nature and deep contemplation, getting the support that I needed for my healing meant that over time I could start to find meaning. Over time I could start to assign a different story, to create a different story about what happened, but also to decide, what will I make of this? Right? I just went through this thing and I don't know why it happened. But what do I want to make from it? Right? What do I want to create from that? like that gets to be the material for something else. It gets to be the, I'm thinking of cooking. It gets to be the gluten-free flour to bake some beautiful cake. It gets to be transformed into something else. And so that's, there's the opportunity for that. And that also happens over time. It did not happen immediately. And the meaning and the story deepens and changes over time, right? And so the invitation that I'm offering is really opening the door, right? So if it feels like you're in that state of isolation that's leading to decline, because there's the isolation that is useful, and that might be where you are. But if it feels like there's the isolation that's leading to decline in different areas of your life, then this really is opening the door so that you might begin exploring what might healing look like? What might deepening that healing journey look like? And so I want to share a few tips, and so many of these are so simple, but I really like speaking to them, especially because people think healing has to be hard. There's this social media post I've been thinking of that I haven't posted yet, but it's the idea that people think that healing is this thing, and it really is also these things that are joyful and expansive and beautiful and pleasurable. And some things that are healing can also feel hard. It can also feel really freaking hard. So I'll share the examples that I chose, and just see what resonates with you. The one that's most obvious is the one that I'll start with. Perhaps not most obvious. It might not be obvious that this is healing, but it probably is the one that occurs most naturally, which is to cry. Yeah. Crying is healing. You might hear people say crying is cathartic, and crying also releases toxins from our bodies. Crying releases shit. Takes things out that don't serve us. And all of these are a form of movement for our bodies, or movement for our being, or movement for our nervous system. And I don't mean movement in the sense that it's like active, like a workout or running or that sort of stuff. It's like there's motion forward, right? There's motion forward from a state that could be described as shutdown, or could be described as a frozen state, to a state of opening up, a state of movement, a state of expansion, or a state of lengthening, right? So crying is one of them. I've mentioned in another podcast episode that my favorite place to cry is in the shower. Something just happens, man, when you're like crying and the water's running down your body. It just all feels so good. Like, yeah, it just all feels so cleansing, just so good. Another one is stretching. So it might be yoga, it might be Pilates, but really allowing for movement in your body. And I'm naming stretching specifically because our emotions are held in our bodies, right? When we've gone through a thing and we weren't able to process the thing because it was too heavy, too hard, the result of that is trauma. And trauma sounds like such a big freaking word, like trauma. Sounds so heavy. Oh my gosh. Oof. But really, trauma is unresolved emotions. And the emotions are unresolved because it was just too much, too soon in that moment, too overwhelming, so that our bodies are wise bodies that have been able to tune into when we're hitting our capacity, when we're going into overload. Our wise bodies just like kept the memory, kept the imprint of those experiences somewhere until we would have the capacity, the support, the spaciousness to actually process them. So it means that everything that we've gone through, every single experience, there is a record or an imprint of it in the body because it occurred in the body, right? Everything that we have gone through in these bodies, there's a record of it. And for the things that are painful, it's still being held somewhere in the body. So there is the shutdown that can occur, like an emotional shutdown. And you can also imagine the body being in a position of shutdown, right? A closed position of the body. And you can already visualize what that looks like for the body to be closed in. And so the motion of stretching the body is beginning to open up. Beginning to open up the body so that there can be some movement to it, so that there can be some flow to these experiences, these stories, these emotions that are locked into different places. And perhaps what you can pair with stretching is music that really just surrounds you with love. It can be music that has affirmations. You can also pair that with essential oils, and I might have to do an entire episode on that because essential oils are really our plant allies, right? Allies from the plant kingdom that are in support of our healing. And so in stretching, you can also just bring in awareness of the different parts of your body and what you might be sensing, right? Like what's your body holding? And really entering into this from a place of non-judgment, not needing to complain about that hip that hurts or, that thing that's there, but really acknowledging, okay, I see you, I feel you, I know that you're there. Okay, I know that you're holding something in that spot, in the neck, in the shoulders, in the lower back, in that leg, in the throat. I know that you're holding something. And I trust that the reason why you're holding something is because that was the best choice available to you in that moment. And so thank you, body, for letting me know what you're holding. Thank you, body, for letting me know what's there. And once we have the support, once we have the resources, we'll keep moving towards healing. We'll be gentle with it. We'll keep moving towards our expansion. I love that. All right, so stretching, and I also mentioned music just now, and I'll add, another dimension to that could be song. So it could be songs that you sing, could be songs that you listen to. And I love, oh God, I freaking love music. Like I love music so much. I love music because it has the ability to just carry emotions. And I was on a Zoom call last night where a colleague of mine who we co-facilitated a retreat last year. I loved the way she described it, which is that it's like the song, it's almost like the song is a boat that can just transport the emotions, transport the stories. yeah, it can just hold what we're holding. And really, if you think of it, right, the music is created from the place of the emotion, right? And so the artist who write the song, whether it's composing the lyrics or the melody, that's coming from the emotion, it's coming from the feeling place. And so to put words to it, to put sound to it, to put the instrumental, whatever it is that is a part of that work of art, right? It holds the energy of those emotions. And so if you find that you're going through something that is challenging, painful, then the songs that have that resonance, the songs that have that energetic vibrational match, they have the ability to support you in feeling seen and validated and understood. And so that alone pulls you out of isolation. That alone pulls you out of the experience of feeling like it's me alone, it's you alone. Yeah, I love that. This is also reminding me that I have several playlists. I was about to say I have a few playlists. I have several playlists matching all kinds of emotional states, by the way, because I love music. And I have at least 3 playlists, it might be 4 actually, that are specifically for moving through grief. And so I am adding myself a note to add a link to those playlists because they just have really supported me in my healing, supported me in having a way for the emotions to feel held, like having a way for the emotions to feel like they have a container, and also having a way for them to move through my body, right? Whether it's through song or movement, dance, whatever it is, like really having a way outward, right? Yeah. Other movement practices, other things that eventually become movement include breathing. So notice the state of shutdown. Notice that when you're in a state of shutdown, your breathing might become shallow. And it might not even be complete shutdown. Even like anxiety, worry, fear, the breath pattern changes. It might become shorter, more shallow. I think that's the same as shorter, basically. It changes. It might be higher, right? Like you might literally feel it in your throat, but not all the way to your chest. Or in your chest, but not all the way to your diaphragm, not all the way to your belly. And so inviting in movement as it relates to the breath is seeing where there might be space to lengthen the breath, seeing where there might be space to widen the breath. And when I guide clients through this, one of the things that I like including is that you actually don't have to force anything. You don't have to push for it to be deeper or wider or to feel it in a certain place. The same gentleness that supports our healing, the same level of empathy and understanding that supports our healing, that's the same way that we can treat our body. So not having to force anything upon the body, but meeting the breath with empathy. You're in my chest today? All right. Yeah, that's what we're doing. And what happens as a result of that is that the breath, the body, the being moves into this place of safety, and the expansion naturally occurs without having to have it be a thing, just allowing it to be what it is. The expansion typically occurs in some way, and we don't have to force it to happen. Like, the like, success isn't the expansion. Success is presence. Success is being able to be with what's there, right? Some other ways of expressing movement are speaking, and you legit can speak to yourself. You can speak through, the recording on your phone. You can speak to a friend. You can speak to a therapist, you can speak to me. You can speak to someone who gets it, and that allows for movement of the emotions, movement of the story. And I love this one. Doing activities that you love. Doing activities that nourish and nurture your body. So that can be rest, can be delicious food, and it can be having encouraging self-talk. Actually, let's keep the self-talk in a different category. Activities that you love. And the gift in that is that they bring pleasure. The gift in that is that they really sort of unroll you out of that state of shutdown and just bring more opening to the body, more pleasure to the body, more ease, more joy. More of the happy hormones that support the body's healing. And then the final example here is encouraging self-talk. You can listen to mantras or affirmations, and you can become aware of when there is a negative thought that shows up, right? When there is a thought of shame or blame, Lord. Yeah, the mind can be so active with those thoughts of shame, blame, guilt, after going through a loss. Yeah, the mind can just really let loose, and things can really fester, especially when you're going through the experience of being isolated. Because there's something else that happens when you say it out loud and you hear it, or when you say it out loud and someone else hears it, versus when it's just in your mind. There's just this ability to feel into, wait, was that true? That doesn't feel true. I don't know about that. Like, I'm saying this thing about myself, but that feels off, because I've had other experiences of who I am. And so, yeah, you don't have to make it something that's hard. You don't have to make it a chore. But anytime you have a conscious awareness of a thought that isn't one that served you, right? And usually the thought matches the emotion. So if you feel sucky, there's some sucky thoughts going on. So you can use that as an indication of like, maybe I can shift some of this self-talk, right? And the self-talk is a part of the story. It's a part of the story that you're holding. And so you get to shift the story over time if you're shifting the self-talk over time. All right, I hope those examples were helpful. I mentioned crying, music, stretching, song, speaking to yourself or a friend or the recorder on your phone, breathing, activities that you love, nourishing your body, and that could be through rest and food, and encouraging self-talk. And the final one that I'll add is getting support through it. So forms of support can be being a part of a support group, whether it's in person or online. It could be working with a coach or a therapist. It could be working with me if, it feels like yeah, it feels like you vibe with me, highly encourage you to explore different practices and find what speaks to you, find what feels like it will support you on your journey. And so, if it feels like you'd like to explore working with me, I would love to explore that with you as well. Feel free to send me an email. And all of this is in the show notes, but my email is hello@nataliefacey.com. My website is nataliefacey.com. I'm on Instagram, and you can also book a call on my calendar. Like, you legit can book a call on my calendar, and what we can explore together is, where are you on your journey, right? You might be in that state of being in your cave. Can be a beautifully decorated cave with some nice dim lighting away from the world. Or you might be stepping out of the cave. You might be starting to share your story in spaces that feel intimate and safe. And you might be going further on the journey. Yeah. And so, wherever you are on the journey, know that support is possible. Wherever you are on the journey, know that your healing is possible. And wherever you are on your journey, know that this isn't an experience that was meant to leave you feeling broken or leave you feeling as though you're alone. And even though it might actually be a fact that your family doesn't understand, your partner doesn't understand, your close friends who you thought you were so connected to, and who you've shared a lot of experiences with, like, they don't understand because they just haven't gone through the thing. They've gone through other things, but not that thing. And so if it is that you're walking through that, living through that, know that support is possible, whether through coaching, therapy. My therapy of choice is somatic therapy because that goes into the wisdom of the body and supports you in connecting with where the healing is ready to occur. So in allowing the body, hi creatures. So in allowing the body to take the lead, the body shows you where it's ready to speak, right? And that speaking occurs in different ways. There are beautiful ways that this unfolds in a session, but know that you're able to tap into the wisdom of the body. You're able to have the body be your guide in your healing journey so that it doesn't feel as though you're re-traumatizing yourself. It doesn't feel as though you're pushing yourself to go through the pain all over again, but you're really moving at a pace where you're in a relationship of trust with the body and you're in a relationship of safety, like tuning into your own sense of safety. All right, beloved, I think that's where I'll end for today. And if you took nothing else from this episode, may you remember that you're not alone on the journey. And there's so many people that I am in conversation with, whether it's through coaching or consultation calls or group sessions or workshops. There's so many people whose stories are very similar to yours. And it's really beautiful when there's that reminder that you're not alone. There's that reminder that the resources are here, like your healing is possible. And so I hope that some of those recommendations are ones that piqued your interest or brought a sense of aliveness that you'd like to explore. And of course, if you'd like to go deeper, you know where to find me on my website, nataliefacey.com, on Instagram at The Birth Warriors. You can hit me up via email, hello@nataliefacey.com, or just book a consultation call, book a clarity call, because yeah, you are worthy of healing. You are worthy of your healing. All right, I am wishing you a beautiful rest of day, evening, night, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.